to welcome you to the Seaplanspace webinar. My name is Dorota Pyć. I'm the manager of Seaplanspace project. I work at the Faculty of Law and Administration of the University of Gdańsk in the Maritime Law Department. My research interests include law of the sea, maritime law, and protection of the marine environment. For over 25 years, issues of sustainable development are also very close to me. I'm fascinated by the mechanism of compliance and enforcement in law, as well as praxeology as a theory and method of conduct. The subject of the webinar is maritime spatial planning in relation to sustainable marine governance. So, in the introduction, just for a moment, I would like to use your imagination a bit, listening to the sound of the ocean, centuries ago and today. What conclusion can we draw? Once, for our ancestors, the ocean was a link between heaven and earth. Nowadays, the world ocean is a universal and common space for all humanity. It is difficult to assess whether the ocean will divide us in the future or bring us closer together. Undoubtedly, solving the problems of the ocean, its protection, and the rational use of its resources requires an effective cooperation at a global, regional, and national level. To some, the sound of the ocean may evoke the harmony of the past flowing into the future. In order not to lose our connection with it, maritime spatial planning for sustainable marine governance should be put into practice following the principles of equity. Well-defined, flexible, and transparent instruments of marine sustainable governance at a regional and national level are key tools towards achieving governance goals concerning the global ocean. The aim of the webinar is to explain the meaning of sustainable marine governance in the context of global ocean governance. Therefore, it is worth considering that sustainable marine governance, is it only an idea or is it a normative theory that needs to be created in the future? Or is it an empirical phenomenon or perhaps a set of a network structure? In addition to the terminology and meaning of sustainable marine governance, the webinar presents the concept of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, as well as Ocean Governance and Marine Spatial Planning Policy Brief and EU Agenda for the Ocean. A few words about the idea of sustainability. We can say that the idea of sustainability is expressed in an assumption of the sentence that says that everything that we need for our survival and well-being depends either directly or indirectly on our natural environment. This is a big word, but in current state of knowledge, this knowledge allows us to define, maybe not clearly, but to define the conditions in which we live on Earth today. Our oceans and seas are threatened by climate change, natural disasters, environmental degradation, depletion of fisheries, loss of biodiversity, and ineffective flag state. So the process of ocean acidification, which has a wide-ranging negative impact of the world ocean, especially world ocean health and marine living resources, is a global problem. This and many other threats, as observed from many years, growth of greenhouse gas emissions, all are reasons for taking proper action internationally and regionally. Many organizations are involved in the process of global ocean governance or sustainable marine governance. For example, this is the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. This is also the European Union and the national governments. All recognize this problem with ocean threats and understand that cooperation is a must for today when we are talking about the idea or the empirical phenomenon. And there is also a question about the role of sustainability. What does it give us? What can we use it for? So, as an idea that can be used in practice, sustainability creates and maintains the conditions under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony. this productive harmony which permits fulfilling a social, economic and other requirements of present and future generations. Multidimensionality is a characteristic feature of marine governance. However, there are dimensions that cannot be ignored. They concern law and policy, cooperation and culture. And here, this is important to say a few words about the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, about UNCLOS. UNCLOS establishes the fundamental legal principles for governance of the marine environment and its resources. It is one of the most important sources of global ocean governance. Furthermore, in the context of GOG, in the context of global ocean governance, the international community is conscious that improving global and regional cooperation should be in the mainstream of socio-economic and political discourse. At present, UNCLOS is not able to provide a response to all the problems of the law of the sea. Therefore, it would seem that there is a great need to provide more pragmatic approaches to global ocean governance by the international community as well as national governments, using the holistic paradigm of sustainable development. The start point to talk about the definition of sustainable marine governance is the global ocean governance, the GOG. GOG belongs to the concept possessing a high degree of complexity. The difficulties in explaining its meaning mainly concern the multidimensionality and dynamics of the development of the ocean management on a legal, economic and social level, as well as political and cultural one. The scope of the ocean governance can be defined as an integrative concept which nowadays allows us to distinguish from whole phenomenon a set of global problems related to the world ocean. MSP here is very important because marine spatial planning is a practical way to create and implement a rational organization in the use of ocean space. It is very important to strengthen that interaction between its users in accordance with the principle of sustainable development and of course the environmental protection and in connection to the implementation of socio-economic goals. Sustainable marine governance is essential way of achieving the objective of sustainable development. It ought to be understood as the process of planning as well as decision-making and management at the national and regional levels, taking the global ocean as an ecological unity into account. The process of decision-making is closely interrelated with the regional and transnational cross-border cooperation. How to define sustainable marine governance? I assume that the following definition may be useful, not only for the implementation of Seaplanspace project, but in many other areas when we are talking about the marine management, marine governance at the regional level. Sustainable marine governance means the continuously improved process of planning, decision-making, and integrated maritime areas management at the regional level, especially at the regional level, because when we are talking about the global ocean governance, we are at the global level, and here we need the definition of something which is close to us, and this is the sustainable marine governance, understand as continuously improved process of planning, decision making, and integrated management at regional level. The impact of sustainable development goals, the impact of sustainable marine governance, of course. Here, due to its dynamic nature, sustainable development is often described as a process that consists of striving and actually achieving more and more sophisticated phases of human development or humanity as a whole, closely related to global international security. Sustainable development is based on the principle of democracy, the rule of law, respect of human rights, and fundamental freedoms. It was founded on the principles of equity and introduces the foundations of building intragenerational and intergenerational solidarity. The Gro-Harlem Brundtland report from 1987, Our Common Future, contains the clarification of the concept of sustainable development, the most frequently cited in the scholarly writing, especially in the legal scholarly writings, understood a development that meets the needs of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. However, despite the well-established foundations, sustainable development and these 17 goals still remain a kind of abstraction for many people, and the development risks which are already visible on the horizon, and maybe not only on the horizon, do not reach the public awareness. The situation looks a bit as if a certain part of humanity suddenly woke up on board the ship in the middle of the ocean and felt storm approaching. Some will think the storm will pass us by. Some will start working to avoid the risk of danger at sea. They are all aware of the danger and do something in their own way. But there is still a whole group of people who cannot see on the horizon what the people on board ship see. So, what arguments should be made to people and how to convince them that there is no alternative other than sustainable development and its goals, that we must all work together for a resilient world? Paradoxically, someone may say that there is no need to see the whole problem to solve it, that maritime spatial planning should be professionally dealt with, and that will be an important action for sustainable development goals. And one should agree with that. MSP is a part of sustainable marine governance. And the sustainable marine governance is an essential driver for achieving the sustainable development goals. The fundamental value of GOG in relation to marine spatial planning as a process and sustainable marine governance in relation to maritime spatial planning as the EU MSP policy and instruments is the maintenance, the long-term sustainability of marine natural resources. So maritime spatial planning involves identifying possible uses of marine resources and their rational distribution, as well as providing sustainable activity in terms of the ecosystem, all of which is performed in the marine environment in order to achieve economic, social, and environmental objectives arising from regional and national policies in accordance with international rules, standards, recommended practices, and procedures for the protection and preservation of the marine environment. In Europe, according to the policy of the European Union, maritime spatial planning involves the process of planning and regulating all human activities in maritime areas, including maintaining the good condition of marine ecosystems as well as marine biodiversity. So, when we are talking about the sustainable marine governance as a normative, the start point is to see the sustainable marine governance in the context of normative awareness. We can say that so far there are no grounds to claim that the sustainable marine governance is a normative theory. It is also difficult to say today whether there would be a justification for it. If so, it would be an expression that the institutional ordering of space, the conviction about the global nature of the problems of the ocean space, is scientifically justified and influences the treatment of the marine environment as a subject of human concern. Unfortunately, the awareness of environmental threats to the ocean does not automatically influence changes in human behavior. However, it is conducive to the emergence of social conditions necessary for taking protective measures and efficient management actions limiting the degradation of the marine environment. Normative awareness in the field of sustainable marine governance refers to three spheres of dependence, namely to the sphere of human dependence on nature, to the sphere of socio-political life, and to the sphere of economic activity. In the sphere of human dependence on nature, ecological values aimed at maintaining biological diversity are of decisive importance. Ecological values include, for example, reverence, evolution, respect, responsibility, interspecies solidarity, mutual connection, compassion. But in the sphere of social life, these are primary such values as intergenerational justice, in access to natural resources, interpersonal solidarity, and responsibility for environmental damage. In the sphere of economic activity, the values stimulating human activity are rationality, restraint and moderate consumption, energy and material efficiency of production, closed circulation of production processes, durability of products, and possibility of their reintegration into the production, the consumption system. And a few words about the legal compliance. The international legal compliance indeed deals with the issue of the compliance of domestic law with the international law. International legal compliance is the theoretical, philosophical trend to international law that has been predicted to develop a theory of international law. This trend was initiated in the early 1990s. It has its roots in a demonstrative debate of legal theorists who believed that after the end of the Cold War, the shape of law was a resultant of the efforts of states influence their behavior and, of course, their critics accepting that this shape would be assigned by the goals of the policies and practice of individual states. So both legalists and skeptics have made an effort to answer the question of whether, and if so, why, and under what circumstances states decide to bring domestic law into line with international law. The use of this output could be quite inspiring, considering, for example, only two aspects, namely negligence in the line to due diligence, of course in legal terms, and incapability to capability in institutional terms. So the non-compliance in the protection of the marine environment, as well as in the sustainable marine governance, reveals a lack of administrative, institutional capacity, regardless of the level of normative compliance. And the next element, this is the enforcement responsibility. The importance of human co-creation and coexistence in the global world ought to derive from the co-responsibility. Co-responsibility for the growing and unpredictable global threats. Global legal space is not a thing suspended in a vacuum now. Its existence and also functioning are associated with institutional interplay on multifaceted basis. The idea of common concern is at the core of the principle of shared by differentiated responsibility. It can be used to distinguish the essence of global original responsibility. For example, common concern means that maintaining biodiversity cannot be reduced solely to domestic affairs, to one or to some group of states, global as well as regional administration. In other words, institutions. This administration is inspired by joint actions, joint decision-making, and mutual conditioning techniques. In principle, and to be, of course, verified in practice, all these elements, supplemented with additional activities and procedures, build and strengthen an enforcement responsibility. The creation of integrated management of the marine environment in maritime areas within the boundaries of coastal states and territories, where coastal states exercise sovereign rights associated with efficient and flexible instruments, allows for a reasonable balance between the protection and preservation of the environment and the freedom to use the seas and oceans. The sectoral approach to the marine environment, developed and persisted through the years, should be balanced by an integrated approach. And the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is very often called the Constitution of the Oceans and Seas, pointed out that main value for the law of the sea is unity of the global ocean. The problems of ocean space are closely interrelated and need to be considered as a whole. This is the preamble to the UNCLOS Convention. So UNCLOS establishes the legal framework for all activities in the oceans. According to its preamble, UNCLOS sets out a legal order for the seas and of course for the oceans to facilitate international communication and promote peaceful uses of the seas and oceans, equitable and efficient utilization of the resources, conservation of the living resources, and protection and preservation of the marine environment. UNCLOS establishes a holistic and ecosystem approach. One of the objectives of this convention is to develop a rational use of marine resources and the conservation of marine living resources. The Convention of the Law of the Sea introduces the obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment to international law. This is the Article 192, and this is also the jus cogens, an imperative for international community. The institutional framework is composed by the administrative mechanisms that are required for established system of coordination and cooperation between all the stakeholders that have a role in the management of the ocean, in order to avoid the fragmentation of decision-making and the exclusion of stakeholders, as well as in implementing an ocean governance framework. The international and regional regulations and procedures of coordination and cooperation should be taken into consideration. In this context, the holistic ecosystem and precautionary approaches are very important as a direction or even driving force for the system. The ecosystem approach has its roots in international environmental law. This approach is defined as the integrated management of human activities based on the knowledge of ecosystem dynamics to achieve the sustainable use of ecosystem goods and services and the maintenance of ecosystem integrity. This kind of approach in this meaning has many implications for GOG, including the need to establish no-take reserves, effective marine monitoring, and protection of threatened and endangered marine living resources. The precautionary approach is necessary to the effective prevention against the degradation of the marine environment. So according to the precautionary approach, where there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, the lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. Holistic, ecosystem, and precautionary approaches are now recognized as rules of marine resources management, but the idea of global ocean governance and regional maritime management is deeply fragmented and insufficiently developed. Numerous sectors are regulated and managed interdependently of others by diverse agencies and under different rules and procedures. Some issues of a functional nature are related with the process of marine spatial planning and the implementation of many of elements which are included in maritime policies. The integrated maritime policy of the European Union arises either through legislative actions as well as executive initiatives of its member states. It is desirable for the development of the management system to base it on the integration of instruments and institutional capacity for cooperation and coordination, the creation, of course, of a knowledge base and cross-cutting tools necessary to enable the introduction of an integrated policy and the improvement improvement of the quality of sector policies through the active search for synergies and increased coherence between sectors. The concept of the EU integrated maritime policy permits a clear vision of the direction the European member states should take to achieve an integrated and sustainable marine governance, sustainable management in marine affairs. So, in Europe, according to the policy of the European Union, maritime spatial planning involves the process of planning and regulating all human activities in marine areas, including maintaining the good condition of marine ecosystems as well as marine biodiversity. The process of decision-making is closely interrelated to international, global, and regional cooperation. This approach is the essence to the maritime policy for both the European Union and the member states in their national and regional maritime relations. This is also a framework for developing actions for better ocean governance. One aspect more, the continuous improvement as an aspect of sustainable marine governance. Maritime spatial planning involves identifying possible uses of marine resources and their rational distribution, as well as providing sustainable activity in terms of the ecosystem, all of which is performed in the marine environment in order to achieve economic, social, and environmental objectives arising, of course, from regional and national policies in accordance with international rules and standards, recommended practices and procedures for the protection and preservation of the marine environment. European regional sustainable marine governance is based on marine spatial planning, decision-making, and integrated management understood as the implementation of decision. And here in this context, the continuous improvement planning procedures and decision making as well. We can talk also about the sustainable marine governance as a network structure by capacity building or using the practice which we gathered in capacity building. But I would like to pay your attention for the aspect of praxeology here. The praxeological motive of effective conduct plays the most important role in the functioning of states and its organizations. Praxeology includes a method of exposing efficient conduct. This is very important, sufficient conduct. The implementation of praxeological instruments in the sphere of fulfilling the obligation of international cooperation and continuous improvement to significant extent coincides with responsible ocean governance. Praxeology, including its international spectrum, is usually focused on a specific effect. Thus, as a science dealing with the norms and principles of effective action, effective conduct, it could strengthen the process of creating value of genuine cooperation in building network structure for sustainable marine governance. And the next thing in this context, when we are talking about sustainable marine governance as network structures, commitment to common language. The frame of order, network structure is a negotiated abstraction until it is filled with the content of cooperation, commitment, and common language. So a common MSP language is essential for stakeholder communication, for example, in South Baltic area, in order to avoid misunderstanding. This is the simplest way here when we are talking of the meaning of this kind of communication, the common language, to avoid misunderstandings. And the marine space culture or marine spatial planning culture. Marine space, as well as marine spatial planning culture, is a concept based of the identification and recognition of cultural values understood as an ethical justification. In other words, we can say that this is the moral duty for the protection and preservation of the marine environment, promoting the need of sustainable marine governance for rational socio-economic economic human uses of the sea space. Successful marine spatial planning can help to ensure that environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable development of the South Baltic as a really important coastal region. So planning culture is not only about the perception of marine environment, but about openness, about cooperation, about trust, and the ability to rely on expert knowledge, skills, and experiences, especially experiences in acquiring tacit knowledge, especially in Europe. The European Union member states are at different stages of MSP development. Moreover, planning cultures differ substantially, which has an impact on how national maritime spatial plans are developed. To achieve the desired level of regional three-dimensional sustainability, it is necessary to develop a common language as an indispensable component of MSP culture. I talked about the sustainable marine governance in 4 aspects, in which the sustainable marine governance was seen as an idea and is seen as an idea. The next as a normative theory, but not only the legal sense, and as an empirical phenomenon. And the last aspect, the third, it was the aspect in which we can talk about sustainable marine governance as a network structure. Maybe this concept, I mean about the normative theory and the network structure, will be useful in the future. What we have now? We have some documents which have a significance, importance nowadays. I mean about the implementation plan, which is the very important element of the United Nations idea called the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And this is the first. And here, this idea, the idea of Ocean Decade, was born in 2016, a few years ago. And the Ocean Decade aims to produce the science we need for the ocean we want. This is very nice, a leitmotif, and very good for our imagination. What kind of oceans we want in the future? What kind of oceans we want now? And this Ocean Decade of the United Nations is coordinated by UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. This is the United Nations body responsible for supporting global ocean science and services. And in this implementation plan, there are 7 outcomes described the ocean we want at the end of the Ocean Decade. All of us know that we have 5 oceans. At the last World Ocean Day on 8th of June, it was decided that we have the Southern Ocean as a 5th ocean. And from the legal point of view, we have now 5 oceans. But here, the 7 outcomes describe the ocean we want are very clear and very well known for more of us. There are clean ocean, healthy and resilient ocean, productive ocean, predictive ocean also. So the safe ocean, an accessible ocean, and the last here, the 7th, is inspiring and engaging ocean. The next very interesting document is Ocean Governance and Maritime Spatial Planning Policy Brief, in which we have 9 factors to strengthen ocean governance and maritime spatial planning, in which we have developing capacity, promoting ocean literacy, integration and collaboration, institutional development, mandates and responsibilities, inclusions of a wide range of stakeholders, understanding common problems, evaluation and adaptation, and transfer of solutions. This is very important to see all these factors like activities, and we can assess that using these 9 factors, we have much more to do than without these driving forces. When we are at the EU level, we have the agenda for the oceans. On the 10th November 2016, the European Commission and the EU's High Representative set out a joint agenda for the future of our oceans, proposing 50 actions for safe, secure, clean and sustainably managed oceans in Europe and around the world. The joint communication on international ocean governance builds on a widely shared understanding that the ocean governance framework needs to be strengthened, that pressures on the oceans need to be reduced, and that the world's ocean must be used sustainably. It is also stresses that a better understanding about the oceans is necessary to achieve three objectives. The joint communication proposes ways the EU can step up and play a stronger role at global and regional level in shaping the ways oceans are managed and used. It sets out detailed actions to shape international governance in three priority areas. The first, improving the international ocean governance framework. The second, reducing human pressures on the oceans and creating the conditions for a sustainable blue economy. And the third, strengthening international ocean research and data. The joint communication is an integral part of the EU's response to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in particular for Sustainable Development Goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources. It's based on the political mandate given to Commissioner Vella by President Juncker at the time to engage in shaping international ocean governance in the United Nations, in other multilateral fora and bilaterally with key global partners. So, in the past 15 years, the European Union has adopted a holistic approach to all marine and maritime issues. For example, the EU integrated policy is a very good example here. The next thing, put in place a robust set of mandatory environmental rules to ensure EU maritime actors use marine resources sustainably wherever they operate. Then, developed an EU-level strategy to boost sustainable and exclusive blue growth, including blue economy considerations in external policies as regards natural resources, energy, trade, development, and security. And the next, put in place regional strategies to address common challenges and opportunities, collaborating closely with non-EU countries and stakeholders from civil society and the private sector, engaged in international and cross-sectoral forums to address the common challenge of ensuring safe, secure, clean and productive seas and oceans worldwide, and adopted the EU Maritime Security Strategy as a comprehensive common tool to identify, prevent and respond to security challenges, and adopted the MSP directive, which is the very useful tool of integrated maritime policy of the European Union. But it is, of course, the process. This is not only tool. This is very important directive which gives us many possibilities to manage the European Union ocean and seas in the future. The last very important thing here when we are talking about the engagement of the European Union in the marine governance is the joint report Improving International Ocean Governance, 2 years of progress. This is the report from 2019, and in 2019 the European Commission published the report of progress. The report is relatively short. It includes reference to the EU's efforts to promote healthy oceans. The joint report includes a type of summary which shows Inter alia, of course, that ocean systems are complex and ocean governance is therefore multifaceted. The strain of climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, of course, offshore extraction and overfishing continue to burden our oceans as well. Taken together, they pose multiple threats to marine life. They pose a formidable challenge, one too big and complex to be tackled by any one country or region alone. Keeping the world's ocean healthy required a broad coalition of actors, of stakeholders, of participants, of states, of course, of institutions, initiatives, etc., acting together under international rules. With a world population set to reach 9 or 10 billion by 2050, the pressure are only set to grow. What we have in this joint report, which is a little bit different to the agenda for the oceans from 2016. There are some elements which are very interesting and that are worth to mention. This is the good international ocean governance and secure environment. In this joint report, it was emphasized the role of marine protected areas as well, and marine data network, and a few sentences about blue science and innovation, as well as marine research cooperation. At the end, I would like to say a few words about the GOG institutions and initiatives. Only a few of them are here on the slide. This is not so easy to talk about all of them and to put it on one slide, but at the global level, the Division for Ocean Affairs and the Law of the Sea is the main institution, main organization in the family of the United Nations, which is responsible for ocean governance at the global level. At the regional level in the European Union, this is the EU International Ocean Governance Forum. And there are other organizations or initiatives from private sector, from NGOs, and there are, for example, Global Partnership for Ocean, which was launched in 2012. This is Global Ocean Commission, which was launched in 2013, and the World Ocean Council, which was launched in 2010. And this is only a few, but there are much more sophisticated illustration for organization and many networks between these organizations are important to provide now and in the future, of course. As a conclusion, I would like to point it out that this is rather obvious that, in fact, the future of the oceans depends on enhanced scientific research on the ocean processes, of course, the effective implementation of the international legal instruments that regulate various ocean activities and a comprehensive and integrated approach to ocean management. But the most important step is to determine how an integrated national and regional maritime policy should be developed and enforced in the future. Engagement is also very important. The culture of engagement, we can say, in other words. So it is rather obvious that the mission of the maritime policy should maximize benefits for the people and the economy from the sustainable use of coastal locations and, of course, marine resources. And consequently, the concept of global ocean governance and integrated maritime policy of the European Union, as well as national maritime policies, have emerged. Furthermore, the relation between the concepts of global ocean governance and maritime policy, that every national maritime policy is an element of the governance of the ocean, should be emphasized. There is no doubt that cooperation of the states for effective global ocean governance at the global level, as well as sustainable marine governance at the regional level, as the result of providing the countries' maritime policies and strategies, and is essentially important and may provide prosperity for present and future generations. At the end, I've got the slide with references, and you can find some of sources which are very useful for study the global ocean governance and sustainable marine governance. Many sources you can find the Seaplanspace web portal and on other portals which are strictly connected with marine or maritime spatial planning. So I would like to thank you very much for your presence, and on behalf of Seaplanspace project partners and myself, I wish you good studying in MSP, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.